Now, a queue is kind of a special data type because not only can you create a queue in multiple ways, such as with a linked list or an array, but you can also have a variation of a queue called a priority queue. So what I want to do is take a regular queue and convert it into a priority queue just to see how those modifications would work. Now, we could, if we want to, extend a class, but I'm just going to copy and paste this in so you can kind of see it in its entirety and focus on the parts that we need to. The first thing we're going to need to change is actually our element, because in addition to a value, we need a priority setting. Now, you can have these priorities defined in a lot of different ways. We're not going to focus on that. We're just going to give it a number. So I'm going to say private int priority. And inside my constructor, if I don't give it a priority, I'm going to say this dot priority is equal to 0. Now I'm going to overload this constructor real quick. Inside my overloaded constructor, I'm going to say this dot next is still going to equal null. This dot value is going to be the value that was passed into my parameter, and this dot priority is going to equal the priority that was passed in as a parameter. So this way I get all those values set. I also need to add one more method, which is to get the value of my priority. So I'm going to say public int getPriority, and I'm going to return this dot priority. I need to do that because priority is a private attribute. So once I've done that, I'm good. I'm going to come over here to my priority queue. I don't need to change my first and last elements. I just don't. So that's going to be easy. I'm not going to need to change my dequeue or my top method because those two work exactly the same. Whatever in the list we are, the very first element is removed. So this is still very similar to a first in, first out. The only one I'm going to need to change is going to be my enqueue. And right now I have an enqueue where I take that default value, where that priority is equal to a 0. And so this method actually is also going to stay the same, because if I don't have a priority, that means that every other element inside of my queue is either the priority that I am or is above me, in which case I'm going to just add to my end. And so I'm not going to worry about that. But I am going to need to add a new enqueue method. And that's going to be if I get a priority value with this as well. And if I do that, this is going to change a few things. So I'm still going to have my element, E, and it's going to equal new element, and I'm going to pass in the value and the priority. So I've got this constructed. So the next part's going to also be the same. I'm going to check to see if this dot first is equal to null. If it is, then I'm just going to make this new element my first. Where this changes is going to be, however, in my else statement. Now, in some cases, it's going to be very similar. For example, if my priority is 0, then I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to put it at the end. So I'm going to check and say if priority is equal to 0, this dot last dot set next is equal to the element we just created, and this dot last is going to now equal the element that we just created, just as before. However, we're going to throw an else in here. And this is what happens if our priority is not 0. Okay, so now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to kind of go through as we would a linked list. We're going to check at the very first and see, okay, where do we stop? Okay, am I a higher priority than anything here? So I'm going to say element current is equal to this dot first. This is just a reference pointer. It's that shallow copy, so we don't have to worry about creating a duplicate or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check my priority and say, okay, if my priority is passed in as a parameter is higher than the priority of whatever my current element is, then I'm going to insert it. Else, I'm going to move through my list. So the first thing I need to do is I need to check to say, hey, is my priority higher than the first element's priority? So I'm going to have an if statement. If priority is greater than this dot first dot get priority, then I'm going to go in and say e dot, that's the element that I created, dot set next is going to be this dot first. It's going to be that pointer to the current first item in the list. Then I'm going to say this dot first is equal to e. Now notice I'm not specifying anything about the last element. Okay, that's not changing. We jump to the head of the line. If that's not the case, if I'm not the first one, or maybe I'm tied with the first one, same priority. Okay, typically same priorities. The first one there takes priority, so that's why it's only a greater than. So if two elements have a value of 10 of priority, I'm going to go and be put after all existing elements with a priority of 10 is created. So to do this, I'm going to create a couple of new references. I'm going to say element previous is equal to this dot first. Element current is equal to this dot first dot get next. So now I have my current and my previous links set up. I'm going to create a while loop. Let's say while current is not equal to null. If my current is equal to null, I've gotten to the end. This is the lowest priority. We're just going to tack it on to the end. No big deal. Okay. If I haven't done that, then I have an if statement in here. If priority is greater than current dot get priority. Okay. If my priority is greater than my current priority, that means that I need to go in between my previous and my current element. I'm going to do something that might seem a little counterintuitive. I'm going to use the break command. The break command is going to exit me out of my loop. You might think, well, why would you do that? Well, you'll see that in just a second. If I don't exit out of my loop, I'm going to set previous equal to current, and then I'm going to set current equal to current dot get next. Outside my while loop is where I'm going to go through this process of inserting in between my previous and my current. Now, if I got all the way and current was equal to null, that's okay. I don't have to worry about that. So that's not going to concern me at all, because previous is never going to be equal to null. And that's the important part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say E, which is the element I created before, dot set next is going to equal current. Is current null? That's fine. Current not null? That's fine too. Doesn't matter. I'm always going to set it. It's just easier. I don't have to do the test. And then I'm going to specify previous dot set next is going to point to E. So if I'm the last element in the chain, I'm just being appended to the chain. If I am not the last element in the chain, I'm getting inserted in between two elements. So notice this takes a little bit of extra work to go through to kind of check that priority, but it's very effective at what it does, and it's still pretty quick. Now, I've got a priority queue here, and you can see that in some cases I've added a priority list, in some cases I haven't. So if I look at this initially, I see that I'm queuing a value of 5. I have no priority, so that's going to be my first element. My second one is a 9 with a priority of 10. 10 is obviously going to be before 9, and so I'm going to move it before that 5, and so now my queue is going to be 9 and 5. I enqueue 12 with a priority of 5. Okay, so what's going to happen is that it's going to see that my priority element of 10, it's going to say, nope, I don't have a higher priority, I'm going to go down. See that 5's got a priority value of 0, it should move in between it. And I can kind of play computer and figure out what this queue is going to look like. And the reason it's always good to do that is so when I come in here and run, I can see, hey, do I get expected results? And if I look at this, I see 9 is removed first, and I expect that. And I look at the other things that are going through, I see 12, and oh, that's a priority of 5. Yeah, I expect that. And then I see 2, because it had a priority of 1, which is higher than 0, so I expect that. Then 5, which is my first element that had a 0 priority put in. I expect that. And so I can see it. This is working as I would expect it to work. And so you can see it did take a little bit more work to do, but it was still relatively easy to go through and do. And that's the whole thing, is it's an easy process. And now if we need to assign priorities to our queues, we know how to do that as well.